Good evening. Glad you are here tonight, and I am excited to have another evening with you and to be able to talk to you about how to have hope in difficult times. We began last night in talking about struggling with God. And really, all of these lessons are going to be different angles and ideas about how we are struggling with God and how we are able to move through those struggles with God. In particular, tonight, as is on the screen, we're going to be looking at the prophet Jeremiah. If you've ever read Jeremiah and you've read his life and you've read his prophecies and the things that he went through, you'll know that he's not somebody you would want to have to live in those shoes and to deal with the things that he ultimately had to deal with. He had a hard life. He had a lot of difficulties and the things that he faced in serving God. One of the things that we're going to notice in his life is we're going to notice in this setup in Jeremiah 12 that Jeremiah has questions for God. And sometimes for us, we can almost feel like it's not right for us to have questions. We should just know all the answers and we should just be fine with that and, don't speculate, don't wonder, don't struggle, and don't question. And I reminded us last night that we see in the scriptures people struggling with God. We see people having questions for God. And Jeremiah is certainly one of them. And I want to provide a little bit of context to the questions that he's about to ask God. At the end of Jeremiah 11, he has revealed to him by God that his hometown, you can imagine the place where you lived, the place where you grew up. They have all conspired together to kill Jeremiah. I mean, that's how well things are going for him. He's doing God's will, proclaiming God's message, and his own hometown says, you know what we need to do with this guy? Let's kill him. In fact, you were reminded of the imagery. It sounds familiar a little bit. It says there in Jeremiah's words of Jeremiah 11 and verse 19 that he was a gentle lamb that was being led to the slaughter. And so I didn't even know that this was going to happen against me, and I was just innocently doing my work and proclaiming God's words, and this ambush had come up against me. And so Jeremiah has some questions for God about that. Here I am doing God's will, and here's what's about to happen at any moment, and that sets the scene for what we're about to see here. Notice in Jeremiah chapter 12 and verse 1, "Righteous are you, O Lord, when I complain to you, yet I would plead my case before you. Why does the way of the wicked prosper? Why do all who are treacherous thrive? You plant them, and they take root. They grow and produce fruit. You are near in their mouth, but far from their heart. But you, O Lord, know me. You see me, and test my heart towards you. Pull them out like sheep to the slaughter, and set them apart for the day of slaughter. How long will the land mourn, and the grass of the field wither? For the evil of those who dwell in it are the beasts and the birds are swept away, because they said, he will not see our latter end." Let's just start with the questions that Jeremiah has. And I think we'll appreciate the questions that Jeremiah has. They are common questions that people have for God. You will notice that he says here at the very beginning in verse 1, "Why do the wicked prosper?" I know nobody's ever asked that. We never want, here's the righteous looking out at the world and saying, why are the righteous suffering and why are the wicked prospering? Why are they doing so well? Why does it seem they're succeeding? Why are they successful? And here I am, Jeremiah, trying to do God's will, and it looks like my life's about to be taken. And I do want you to appreciate that you will notice that Jeremiah is not challenging God. Notice the very beginning is, "Righteous are you, Lord. I know you are right. I know you are holy. I know that you always do what is good, but why do the wicked prosper? In fact, it is such a common question. You might remember that Psalm 73 addresses that. Remember, the psalmist says there, when he considered the wicked, that his feet nearly slipped. His faith was rattled when looking and seeing they seem to do so well in their rebellion, and here I am trying to obey, and I don't understand why I'm suffering and they're succeeding. I want you to notice a little bit more about what he says about this. When he says not only there in verse 1, why is the way of the wicked prosper, and why are all those who are treacherous thrive, but I want you to notice that isn't just merely the outsiders, but notice in verse 2, he's describing people who claim to be God followers in mouth, but not in heart. You see that there at the end of verse 2, you draw near in their mouth, but are far from their heart. He's like, here they seem like they're, all in, but they're not. And he knows that God knows that. It's not like he's saying, hey, God, why don't you know that these are hypocrites? Don't you know that they're saying one thing and doing another? No, this is the essence of his struggle. Why are the wicked prospering? Why are they thriving? You plant them and they take root and they grow and they produce fruit. And you're near in their mouth, but you're nowhere near when it comes to their heart. And listen to the contrast that Jeremiah gives of himself in verse 3. Verse 3, Jeremiah says, that's not me. That's not me. I'm not a hypocrite. You know that I'm true. Test me. Test my heart. And see, that I'm with you. You know that I am faithful to you. They're not faithful to you, but I am. And that, I want us to see, is the reason for the words that are given there in verse 3 and why that context of what is happening is so important. Here's Jeremiah saying, I'm being led like the innocent, gentle lamb to the slaughter. And God, I know you're righteous, and I'm striving to do what is righteous, and you know that they are wicked and that they only say things, but their heart is not true. So rather than allowing me to suffer and die, should you not deal with the wicked who are trying to kill me? That's the essence of the question. Why don't you do something to them before they do something to me? I know we've never felt that way. I don't understand why this mistreatment, and I'm trying to do what's right, and they're standing against me, and they're wicked. And notice that leads to the other very common question that we often ask God is in verse 4. So how long? How long? How long is this going to go on? How long are they going to seem to prosper? How long is it going to be difficult for me? How long until you finally do something? So often in our trials, one of the greatest wonders that we have before God is how long until something gives? How long until you finally act? So now I want you to think about the petition of Jeremiah. I want you to think about what he's experiencing. I want you to think about how he's framing the request. These people are trying to take my life. I'm trying to righteously serve you. Why are you allowing their plans to go forward? Why are they succeeding? Aren't you going to do something before they do something to me? Now, here's what I want you to think about before we look at verse 5. What do you expect God to answer right here for Jeremiah? What do you think the words of comfort would be? That God would come in and say to Jeremiah at this moment, so that he will keep going, to not give up, to stay faithful and not lose heart. Are you expecting some big words of comfort? That's what I would expect. I would expect it's going to be okay. Watch verse 5. Here's God's answer. If you have raced with men on foot, and they have wearied you, how will you compete with horses? And if in the safe land you are so trusting, what will you do in the thicket of Jordan. There's your answer. Now, I'll be fair. There's a lot of answers God gives to Jeremiah here. If we had a much longer meeting to come back and go, okay, now, so this is your homework. Go read verses 7 to the end of the chapter because there's more answers that God is going to give. I only have time for tonight for one of them, so we're just going to look at one of the answers. And this is the answer. If you have been running with humans, with men, what are you going to do when you run with horses? That was not the comfort I was looking for right there. Here's God framing it. Well, right now you're only running with humans. Imagine what it's going to be like when you have to run with horses. I'd be like, I don't want to run with horses. What do you mean? And then notice the other picture. If right now you are on the safe ground, the trusting ground, the level ground, what are you going to do when you're thrown in the thorn bushes? And if I'm Jeremiah, would said, I thought I was already in the thorn bushes. I thought I was already running with horses. What do you mean that this is the level and flat ground and I'm going to be thrown in the thorns? What do you mean to say that I'm running with humans now, and what will I do when I have to run with horses? What I want us to observe right now is God's response to Jeremiah is basically, you're not going to give up now, are you? You're not going to crumple now, are you? If you're struggling right now, what are you going to do when it gets harder? Now, don't worry, I can see it in your faces, and trust me, it was in my face when I first read it. I thought we were here for a hope series. What are we doing right now? That doesn't seem very encouraging. Hey, it's only going to get worse. Amen and good night now. What is God doing here to say, hey, if you think it's hard now, you haven't seen anything yet. Are you really going to quit now when things are only going to get amped up all the more? What is God trying to say here? And what I want us to step back and think about is this is actually not an uncommon response from God. There are many things that God says to us in our difficulties and in our trials, in our sufferings. And sometimes God has to come to his people and say, hey, I know it's hard, but there's a lot more to come. And you need to prepare yourself. Let me show you a few of them. In Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 35, he tells them, do not throw away your confidence, which has great reward, for you have need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you'll receive what is promised. You notice there, that's the same idea right there. Here's God telling these Christians, and when you read chapter 10, remember what they are suffering. They've been in prison. They've had their property seized. They're going through hard times, and they are suffering. And here's God's answer to them in this. You have need of endurance. In fact, he'll say that again just a little bit later on in chapter 12 and in verse 1. Since you're surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely to us, and let us run with endurance for the race that is set before us. So often God comes along and says, what you're going to need for this race, what you're going to need in this life is endurance. In fact, a few verses later in Hebrews chapter 12, consider him, speaking of Christ, what did he do? Endured from sinners such hostility against himself. In fact, I want you to notice the rest of verse 4 because to me, this sounds very much like what God told Jeremiah. In your struggle against sin, you have not resisted to the point of shedding your blood. Did God just say right there, it could get worse, and at least it hasn't been that? That's what that sounds like. That's essentially what God was telling Jeremiah. And God was telling these Christians here. Now, here's what I want us to think about as we consider these images for the need of endurance. Is then after he says this, he's got one more image that I think is just very relatable. Therefore, lift your drooping hands and strengthen your weak knees and make straight paths. Now, I want you to appreciate the image for a minute. When things are getting really hard, and when your trials are really bearing down on you, is that image not perfect that your hands are slumped down? And how do your knees feel spiritually when you're going through the trial? Weak knees. It's a great image of exactly what trials feel like. He's telling them, your hands are drooping down. Your shoulders are sagging. Your knees are weak. But I want you to notice what he tells them. Lift those hands. Strengthen those knees. I know that you are breaking. I know that it is hard. I know that it is a struggle. I know that it is painful, but pick those hands up and strengthen those knees. Now, look at why he says that's so important. Notice what he says is going to happen if we don't do that. So that what is lame, you can imagine here's hands and knees and weak, may not be put out of joint, but healed. There's a fascinating image that God is using by saying, if you allow your hands to stay down and you allow your knees to stay weak, you're going to let the trial win. And what is weak and lame is going to become disjointed and unable to be healed again. This image that God keeps using and saying, you need endurance, you need strength, you need to pick up your hands, you need to run the race that is set before you. Now, here's what I want us to focus on in thinking about these images that are given to us, is that sometimes what we can do is we can read a passage like that and say, well, God doesn't care, or he thinks that this is easy. You know, that's what we do. If somebody comes up to us and says, you know, I'm going through this really hard thing. Here's what we like to do. We come back at him and go, well, you think you've got it hard. Let me have you discount your trial because mine's way worse. And that's not what God is doing. I want you to notice what he tells them in verse 6, that we can see that that's not at all what God is doing. In verse 6, then God continues and says to Jeremiah, for even your brothers and your father's house, even they have dealt treacherously with you, and they are in full cry after you. Do not believe them, though they speak friendly words to you. I want you to notice that God's answer to Jeremiah is, oh, well, you know, just buck up. It's fine. It's not that bad. That's not what he's saying. In chapter 11, he told them, your whole town wants to kill you. And then in verse 6, he says, and oh, by the way, when you go home, be really careful because everybody in your house is lying to you. And they want to kill you too. So please don't hear Jeremiah or the writer of Hebrews or any of the scriptures saying, your experience is not hard. God's not saying that. God's never saying that. What God is asking you is, if it gets harder, does that mean you're going to give up? He's posing a question to us. I know it's hard, but now what are you going to do? What are you going to do next? How will you handle the difficulty that is being put before you? Now, here's where I think things become particularly challenging for us, and when you start thinking about the mechanism by which endurance comes. Have you ever noticed this curious thing? This just struck me one day, and it's not profound, and yet for some reason it was very profound to me. The only way endurance comes is by enduring. Think about it in life. If you want to go prepare for a marathon, you just roll out of bed and go run all those miles, right? No. You've got to learn how to run 1 mile, and then you're totally winded and out of gas, and you're like, I can't do it. And then you're able to get to 2 miles, and then you're able to get to 3. Or if you like using weights, then where do you start with? You start with the barbell, and that's all you can do. And then you start adding weight and adding weight and adding weight. Or whether you're doing any kind of physical activity, the only way endurance builds is by enduring. If I give up for the marathon every time at 1 mile and go, well, I can't do it, I will never be able to do the marathon. It will be impossible. If I always stop at the 55-pound barbell and go, well, I can't do it, that's it, then I'm never going to get there. The only way endurance is ever built is by enduring. And this is one thing that God is saying all over the New Testament, right? What does Romans 5 verse 3 tell you? That suffering is going to produce endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope, and that doesn't disappoint. And I wish all the middle was all out of that, and God could just say, I'm just going to give you hope. But how does hope come? From the character that comes from the endurance that comes from the suffering. What does James tell you? What's in trials doing? Why can you count it all joy? Because trials produce endurance. I wish the scripture said that our endurance comes by relaxing in a hammock, drinking Dr. Pepper Zero, fanning me and relaxed, and as I relax on my couch and I am sipping my Dr. Pepper Zero, God is making me stronger. And I am ready for anything that's going to come. But that's not how it happens. And I want it to be where it was through ease and comfort that we would be able to endure. But God's trying to say, the only way you will be strong enough to endure what's going to come next is by enduring what you have right now. That's the essence of the answer God gives. If you're unable to run with men, what are you going to do when it's time to run with horses? If you're only able to stand firm on the safe level ground, what are you going to do when life puts you in the thorns? God is trying to build endurance for us to help us see what we need. And friends, we know this. Brad did a great job with thinking about the songs, because how often do the scriptures point us to future hope to give us some of that strength that we need? In Romans 8 and verse 18, for I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. Do you think when we all get to heaven and we're all enjoying paradise and eternity together and we're in the presence of God, that we are going to be comparing notes and saying, I don't know that this eternity thing was worth all the suffering that we went through. I mean, that was bad back there, guys. I don't know. I don't think that's going to be in our minds. I don't think any of us are going to be like, yeah, I know, but you have... We're going to be like, this glory is going to erase what we've had to endure to get to that point. And please remember that it's the Apostle Paul saying that. Did he have a list of things that he could talk about that he was enduring? That he could say is not worth comparing to the glory that's to be revealed? I mean, here's the guy that is stoned and left for dead, and after being dragged out of a city, or he's shipwrecked. I mean, he's beaten, and he's going through everything for the cause of Christ. And you could not take his joy from him, because he understood that endurance is producing character, and character is producing hope, and that hope does not disappoint. One of the things that I think is truly challenging for us when it comes to our suffering and our difficulties is I believe, if you're like me, that all of us have the hope, and we have to have this hope, that it's going to get better. This has to get better. I'm in this really bad thing. This trial is really bad. And surely by next week, next month, next year, it's going to get better. It's going to break. There's going to finally be some relief. And we're going to get out of this trial. And it's going to be so much better. But I do want to challenge you to think, but what if it isn't? 20 years ago, our daughter was born with Prader-Willi syndrome, and it has been our greatest prayer every day from the moment we had that diagnosis was that surely things will get better. Technology will advance, medicine will advance, they will come up with a cure, they will come up with a treatment, they will come up with an answer. There will be some way for her to live a normal life. And you think, 20 years is a long time in what's going on in our world. Surely in 20 years, we're going to find something and it's going to get better. But it hasn't. And I think it is reasonable to argue it has gotten far, far more difficult. It has gotten way harder rather than easier. And I look at the words that God gave Jeremiah as saying it to me 20 years ago. If you're going to break right now when you're running with men, you might be running with horses in 20 years. And so you better get ready. If you're struggling when you're on the stable ground, what are you going to do if it gets a little bit worse? God did not make a promise to us that our trials are going to get better if you just hang on another year. God never said it's going to get easier for you if you just give it another day. You may be in the position where God is telling you, I know it feels like you're running with horses, but I'm getting you ready so that you can run with horses. I know you think you feel like you're in the thorn bushes right now, but I'm getting ready to show you you're about to get in the thorn bushes. So I need to prepare you now. The New Testament is giving us this picture and giving us the hope that we need to set our eyes in the right place. And in the midst of the text that we just talked about, you'll remember that the writer of Hebrews says, after telling us to run with endurance the race that is set before us, he says, I want you to look to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross and despising the shame. Now, I often will stop here, and I think it's a great place to stop and think about everything that Jesus went through. Run with endurance the race that is set before us. Look to Jesus and see what he endured. But listen to what the author says is the basis of hope and confidence. Consider him who endured from sinners such hostility against himself. Why should I be looking to him? Why am I seeing his suffering? Why am I seeing how he endured the cross and disregarded the shame? So that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. When you're questioning God and you're saying, I don't understand why everybody out there seems to have it so well and I don't. Or you're questioning God and you're saying, how long? How long is this going to keep going on? How long will the trial continue? How long until there is relief? How long until things get better? A very important answer that God is giving us here is he says, I want you to look to Jesus, because by looking to him, that's to give us the strength to not give up. The cross becomes not only the powerful place of salvation and the place of forgiveness of sins, but the cross is also supposed to be the place in which we look when we are being beaten down in our trials and enduring hardships and suffering, and we are looking to him who endured such suffering for us. And we are saying, I can keep going because of what he's done for me. I'm not going to give up because of all that he has done for me. I wish this was my quote, and if I could remember where I found this from, I would put his name on there when I was reading it. But sometimes I have realized, I won't say sometimes, I'll say most of the times, I have realized that this has been a key part of my prayer life that has been missing. He wrote, we do not pray for a lighter load, but a stronger back. And I was struck by that. Because I thought, how many times do I just pray, God fix it, God heal it, God make it stop? Make it end. This is too much. I just want to stop. Make it stop. And how rarely do I pray, give me the strength to carry the load? I don't have time, but you might remember in Acts 4, after the apostles are threatened and they're told you need to stop preaching, and Peter and John go back and they tell the other disciples about their experience. And they offer up their prayer, and they talk about how this is exactly what Psalm 2 was talking about, how the nations rage, and how Herod and Pilate and everybody has stood against the Lord and his anointed, just like God had promised. And I want you to think about how their prayer ends. It is amazing to me that when they end their prayer, they do not pray, so Lord, because of their threats against us, would you please make them stop threatening us so that we can preach the gospel? That's not what they pray. They say, so give us the boldness to speak. I would have prayed the opposite. I would have prayed, make them leave us alone. Make the situation easier so that we're more comfortable to speak. And they don't ask that. I submit to you what they're asking is, we're not asking for a lighter load, we're asking for a stronger back. Give us the boldness to say the words in the face of the threats. And friends, we need the boldness to be able to come before God and say, Lord, this is hard. I don't understand. I don't know what is going on. Give me the strength that I need, and give me the strength so that I can become what you want me to be. For me, I have to stop praying, get me out of this, and change it to, what can I get from this? Lord, what are you doing in my life so that you can make me stronger, so that I can be ready to run with horses? Lord, what are you doing in my life to give me the endurance that I need? Because what might be around the corner is the thorns, and things may become only more difficult. Jesus endured so that we would not grow weary, that we would not be faint-hearted, that we would not give up. Jesus endured so that we would run with horses when the time came. And I will ask you to think about, if God's answer to your prayers about your trials and your hardship and your suffering turns out to be an answer, that if you are running with men now, what will you do when you have to run with horses? that you have mentally prepared yourself for that response, that you will be bold, and you will be faithful, and you will endure even if it gets harder. Daniel's 3 friends. Nebuchadnezzar says, hey, when the music plays, just bow down. And you can avoid the fire. They don't do it. He gives them another chance. How easy it would be to say on the second chance, I think I'll step out on this one. The fire is right in front of me. It's time to give up. It's time. No, we're not going to endure anymore. Are you impressed by their boldness? We don't care whether you play the music again or not. And we don't care how hot you make the fire. We will never bow down. Are we ready to run with horses? And are we ready to endure all that God is giving to us? Because we know that in our suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And friends, that hope will never put us to shame.